morning moving is we're going to move to the panel discussion. Some of these things are again going to come up. Warren and Jeff are also going to participate with the club managers. And as we go through this, you'll see a bunch of things come up that I think we've already talked about this morning. Last night I was lucky enough to have dinner with the panel, and we had a very interactive discussion, some debate about different issues and how the different clubs handle things. And what was interesting, I think, for Warren and I is Garden City Country Club and Nissaquag, we're not Wingfoot, Baltusrol, or Congressional, yet all of the problems are the same. Regardless of the size of the club, regardless of the history, whether or not you held the U.S. Open, all of this relates to the size of our clubs and the different things we're dealing with. So I hope as we go through this morning, you can take that perspective, that all of our clubs have the same issues, big or small, where they're located, and again, take out of this what you need to do to help to continue to proactively manage your club. For starters, I'd like to introduce Colin Burns, somebody I've known a very long time. Colin began his career at Plandome Country Club right here on Long Island. Since then, he served as the general manager of the Wingfoot Golf Club for the past 20 years. Colin is widely considered one of the most well-respected club managers in the country, having also served as the director of operations for both the 2006 U.S. Open and the 1997 PGA Championship at Wingfoot. So Colin, thank you for joining us today. So Colin, if it's okay, we're going to lead off with you and talk about how does a club like Wingfoot, with customs and traditions and the things that Wingfoot stands for, at the same time be able to adapt to the changing membership, especially the challenges around newer members and their demands and needs versus some of the more traditional members?
First of all, thank you for having me here this morning. It's nice to see all of you. It's funny, I was thinking about Plandome as I drove out here, and I remember Jay, I think you visited in 1998 to sell me on the idea of having members put in their own handicaps in a computer, and now we're looking at this mobile app. It's really an amazing sea change that's taken place over the years. One just brief note, Jeff Holshoe, who's a member of Wingfoot, and I both have Blackberries. Just for those few of you who have them, don't feel so bad. It's an interesting question, the way it's asked about, the question asks, how do we maintain our traditions while at the same time sort of staying relevant? And I think another way to ask the question is, why do we do that? And we do it very simply, and both Warren and Jeff mentioned brands, the branding of your club, the branding of the association, the MGA. And we have a brand, and it's a brand that was established in 1921. I spent countless hours. I have the good fortune of having all the original minutes that are in very, very poor shape, and I handle them very carefully. But when you read, what was written back then, the way they spoke to each other, the pictures that were taken, it was a very gentlemanly, civil environment. And so that's part of our brand. Coming to Wingfoot up until, I can't remember what year at this point, maybe it was 96, men still had to wear long pants, maybe 95 or 96. Jackets were required almost everywhere. Now, we have made changes. We don't allow jeans. Shirts still have to be tucked in. But, so we've made some modifications, and yet we feel it's very important that we don't stray too far from our brand. Now, everyone's brand is different. I mean, some clubs, their brand is casual. Some businesses, whether it's a local pizzeria, whether it's a local, whatever it is, they have their brand. Our brand, in our case, is one of sort of modern day formality, upholding the traditions of golf. And so we've tried to strike a balance. We think we do a very good job of balancing the needs of the new members. To Michael's point about cuisine and offerings, we've modified tremendously, yet at the same time we maintain a certain balance with those things that we consider Wingfoot tradition. So it's not easy, and yet most people expect us to do that. Most people come to Wingfoot expecting it to be what they've heard about. A little bit formal, a little bit serious, certainly a place where golf is honored, and you can tell as you walk down the various hallways. And so I think if we did that sort of as a convenience, say, well, we're going to just, we're going to relax things because it's not worth pursuing, sending out letters. Some weeks I'll send out 30 letters about rubber flip-flops and cell phones and shirts being untucked. but it's important to us, so we pursue it and we maintain that tradition. And it's funny, we actually get very positive responses for the most part when we quote discipline members, because they want to be a part of the Wingfoot tradition, as do their guests. So that's where we're at this point.
Kevin, comment?
Yeah, just to add to what Colin was talking about, traditions and customs have to have value. And if they no longer have value, you have to really take a look at that. And a good example for both of our clubs was shorts. It was no longer the same value. It was becoming more of a problem than a value. And so we were one of the last clubs to have that. And believe me, that was a struggle. It was a 5-6 year ordeal. 95% of the membership voted on that. So 95% of our members actually voted yes or no to that. But it also speaks to tradition and how important tradition and your customs of your club are. But things need to be relevant, and you should challenge yourself all the time on your brand. It is something that should be on the forefront of your strategic planning, your long-range planning, because you always should challenge yourself to be better. And again, we're no different than any other club. We have our issues for those things, but even though you do have tradition and brand, you do have new members coming in. And if you told me, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago that every single floor of Baltusrol would have a communication center that would be available for cell phones and have the internet capabilities and things of that nature, every single floor for that, I would tell you no. But you have to adapt to what your member needs are, whether you're a golf club or a country club.
Kevin?
Yes, Colin, how do you get your employees to enforce some of the very straightforward rules like cell phones and t-shirts? How do you
You're cutting into my
empower
speech.
your-
You're kind of taking my
Oh.
thunder. I was leading down the path, but actually in a similar way. But can you talk a little bit about the relationship between your roles and your boards and the support you need, and then add in what Jay's talking about is ultimately you as managers, but also your employees have to deal with. And how does that kind of chain of command work in each one of your clubs? It can get testy when you listen to Lauren's comment about employees, members, friends, family members. I belong to a club where we recently had to discipline a family member, and I happen to be on the membership committee at that club. And it's kind of an interesting problem when your younger cousin has got a problem, you need to deal with it. So can you guys comment on that? I think it'd be helpful.
Employee issues are issues that are probably more easier to handle. First of all, your employee handbook has to be updated. If your employee handbook is 2-3 years old, it has the wrong information on it. And you need to do that with a labor attorney. There's nothing worse than having an employee issue and finding out the information that they're talking about is inaccurate. You have a problem. Member issues are a little bit different, and I guess the severity of it is always in question. I'm in favor of what Warren's talking about, back of the house, behind closed doors. Try to resolve it as quickly as you can. But I can tell you something that we do that's very important, that we have outside counsel on this. Small things can become very big things if they're not handled appropriately in the beginning. So a lot of the member issues that we deal with, we do get outside resource for that. I can tell you that our staffs are trained to handle that first brush, and if it goes further, then the management team steps in, and then it's our responsibility to step in for that. And I think that the respect level has to come from your board. If they've backed you the way they have time and time again, your membership knows that. So you just really have to have your backing of your leadership, and then you can put a program in to handle it.
Jay, if I may, to answer the question, I mean, we have a very specific process that's established by the board. First of all, just very simple, clean, understandable rules. Disseminated, put everywhere, website posted. I mean, Jeff will tell you that it's we're chronic about that. We need to make sure that before we comment about somebody, breaking a rule that they know, and they have no excuse for not knowing. The board then expects from my office down to have every employee participate in the enforcement process. And as I mentioned earlier, these letters that go out, and some of them are annoying, they're a little bit tedious, but it has become an integral part of us maintaining the sort of the discipline, if you will, that we're looking for. So just to give an example, the starter sees, two guests approach. One has their shirt out, one is wearing rubber flip-flops. Within a minute, David Zone is calling my office. He leaves a voicemail or sends an email to my administrative assistant, and by the end of the day, a letter has been sent out. Now, what we do is we manage those letters. If they're repeat offenses, and if there's things of a more severe nature, that gets kicked up to the Membership Standards Committee. But we feel that it's very important that as consistently as possible, that we address each and every one of these issues on a daily basis. And again, without exaggeration, there are weeks when I will send out 30 letters.
Michael, you commented last night at dinner about the sheer number of people in Congressional. Between members, spouses, children, guests. I think you threw out a number last night. It was 10,000 people that can flow through Congressional. You must have some experience here.
Well, I would just say the same as what Kevin and Colin have said. I mean, it's really up to the staff to be taking care of that on a hourly, daily, monthly, weekly basis. But with the support of the board and certainly with the support of the president, we have somebody come down to the golf shop who is dressed inappropriately. That's going to be dealt with by the starter, then by the golf professional if the starter can't get it done, and then by my office if they can't get it done. And if I can't get it done, then it's going to go to the board through the disciplinary process. But we like to deal with it immediately. And if somebody is inappropriately dressed, they have choices. Go home and get dressed properly, or buy something from the golf shop, or don't play.
So to follow up on that, how do you cut off some of these problems? How do you make this not occur in our clubs? And I think many people have new member programs where in the last 5 or 10 years, as membership has turned over a bit, what do you do to educate members as they actually join the club on these topics? And Michael, you can start with that. And what do we do as soon as somebody joins the club?
Well, we have what we call a social guest policy, which is really members that are about to become members. They're sort of sitting and waiting on a wait list that are social guests. They have use of the amenities without the use of golf. So there's a process where there's a vetting process through which they go. So they're on a wait list. They've gone through the normal process to get into the club. We then bring them in as social members, but we don't use the word members. We use the word guests. They have all of the privileges of the club with the exception of golf. We do 2 golf outings a year for them, so the board members and others can interact with them. The normal processes that most clubs have of bringing new members in and orientating them and going through all of the different process. I think that's really the key, is making sure that they understand ahead of time what is expected of them when they do become a member.
Colin, how about
We're for the first time, and to be specific, I'm at Wink for 23 years now. And I see the shift that's taken place. And even though new members are put through an even more rigorous process than they were 10 or 15 years ago, just in terms of the process itself, that from sort of a societal standpoint, while these people who are getting into the club know the club very well and they know the members very well, we are now for the first time where we're having mandatory emphasis on mandatory member orientation with spouse. The only optional part of it is whether or not the sponsor will be there. But their accounts will not be activated for the upcoming 2014 season without having attended. And we intend to be somewhat flexible with the dates, and we have a very specific program. But we're at the point now where we feel the need, and we're like a lot of clubs. Wingfoot has not been immune to membership issues. We've been a little bit more active in the process, and we've streamlined the process a little bit. But starting this coming year, there will be a mandatory or a formal orientation that will involve myself, the president of the club, the head professional, and we haven't quite determined who else, but it will be mandatory.
I agree with what Michael and Colin have said on this, and, it does start with the admissions process, the sponsors, and the vetting before they become members, that they fit the criteria of what you're looking for your particular club. We do a monthly mandatory orientation, and the sponsors need to be there, the admissions committee needs to be there, and the department heads need to be there for that. And again, though, I really believe that you have to vet through what Michael's saying. For him, it's a member in waiting for that they understand what they're getting into. And if they don't fit that brand, and I know everybody's looking for members, be careful what you ask for.
I just think there is a much greater need for this type of a program at clubs like ours, and probably a lot of the clubs who are represented here, because we're getting a lot of members who haven't been around clubs and really don't have many instances a clue as to how they're supposed to behave. And so I think it's really much more necessary for the vast majority of clubs than there is your types of clubs.
To be blunt about it, there's, I think for most of us in the room, joining one of these clubs we viewed as a privilege. I think what we've seen is a change based on age group and other things of entitlement. And a term I use about children all the time, and they don't like hearing it, but the reality is they have to think that way. That the ability to help educate the group that are joining, to be able to think about what the traditions and history of all of our clubs are, and how to maintain some of those standards, I think is important. I see a hand up. I'm going to take the risk of doing this once, but not more than once, so we stay on track a little bit, and then there'll be plenty of time for Q&A, but go ahead.
Thank you. I think my question will be timely. We run into the opposite effect, where the younger members are very respectful and are in good behavior. It's the older legacies that have a sense of entitlement. They can walk around, they can do whatever they want, or children of older members' legacies. How do you deal with that, where you have a 30, 40-year member that has an air of entitlement that the rules don't apply to them?
Yeah, the rules apply to everybody but me syndrome. Yeah, we get that. You hold the same standards. Those can be difficult meetings. Personally, with a senior member, I'll make sure that I have the backing of the leadership because I know where it's probably going. And again, I try to do it behind closed doors and be on point. Don't get off point, and try to get it resolved as quick as you can, and let them know it's being noticed by his peers or her peers.
Yeah, the way I handle it, and I'm being somewhat facetious but serious at the same time, is that instead of the letter being signed by me, the letter is signed by the House Committee with the House Committee's permission. It gets very sticky, particularly with an older member. In cases where you've been at a club for so long, you've gotten to know them on a very personal level. So we don't discipline the members any different, and we do have plenty of legacies. But what I do, and maybe I'm being a little bit of a chicken about it, but I remove myself, send the draft of the letter to the House Committee, or if it's golf and tournament, depending on which, what the infraction is, and then get their permission to sign off on it. They still get the letter; it still goes in their file. But I remove myself just by one step.
That's why he's been there for 20 years.
That's why I've been there 23 years. Well, I hope to be in 23 years. But I'm with Colin on this one. I think there's a point where the general manager and the staff have to go to, and then after that, it has to be member on member, peer on peer review. And I think when it comes to disciplining staff, that's the job of the general manager or the management. When it comes to member-staff interaction and discipline, there has to be members involved and there has to be the general manager or staff involved. When it comes to member-only discipline, depending on the severity, I'm not talking about you using your cell phone or you got flip-flops on. I like the flip. Never heard of flip-flops. I like that. It might work for us with our shirts up, flip-flops. But when it comes to member-on-member stuff, that is handled by the president and the vice president. It's in our constitution, it's in our bylaws, it's in our house rules. We have a disciplinary committee, and I think as Warren said, it's written out very clearly how people handle that. And I think that way when you're talking about somebody who's been there a long time, legacy members, he doesn't want to hear it from the GM. He wants to hear it from the president. He doesn't want to hear it from anybody. But if he is going to hear it, it's going to be a lot more meaningful if he hears it from the president and the vice president. And I always suggest that there's two of them in the room, not just the president and whoever it is that's being spoken to.
So there's some granular discussion about some things. And what I'd like to do is move it up a little bit and talk about long-range planning. At dinner last night, it was clear to me, listening to the general managers here, that some clubs, and I think we can all relate to these three topics, some clubs are spending their time running their club. So the board's running the club, the staff is running the club, and they're kind of living in the moment. There's some clubs that are still kind of playing defense and are reactive to the challenges of the last bunch of years and still trying to work through that. But it was clear to me at dinner that these three clubs are proactively kind of pushing the ball down the field. Michael, I think you mentioned how the waiting list, is not quite as robust as it once was. Colin just mentioned about even Wingfoot has some membership challenges from time to time. So I think my question, I'd like to start with Jeff, because whether you're thinking about the MGA board and the things we've been trying to do for the last bunch of years, and obviously been progressive and proactive on many topics, or it's our clubs, can you start by commenting a little bit about the proactive leadership around our boards and what we expect from our management team, and then can the general managers follow up on that?
Sure, thanks, Mike. I'm just in amazement that in 15 years at Wingfoot, I haven't gotten a letter from Colin yet. Me and my kids. I don't know.
Put on a pair of flip-flops.
I have that, sure. Look, I spend a lot of time in my day job and have spent a lot of time with EMT and others thinking about strategic planning. To me, it's all about wanting to strategic plan. The biggest, I think, misnomer in people's ability to strategically plan is they don't want to face the trends that Michael laid out. They don't want to face change. Strategic planning in general is about change and balancing it with tradition and branding and all the things that we've heard this morning. And it is a skill set. There are lots of people who try to do it that have never done it. And I think it is something that's hard to do because it has to be an honest self-assessment. It has to be overlaid by the trends, and it has to be taking advantage of those attributes that your club in particular is trying to put forth. And to the extent you're seeking new members, to the extent you're changing something that you've done historically, those are hard things to do. I think as it relates to the MGA, it is about having good data. It's about understanding the demographics, understanding things that are not easy. So it takes work to compile it. People do help. Everybody that works at the MGA or works at these clubs has a full-time day job. And the strategic planning aspect is in addition to that. When I heard Mike say this morning that he asked his directors for 40-plus hours for this process during the course of a year, I think that's a very realistic, it could be 100 hours. There are some that spend tremendous time on it. So I'd say my advice is, again, to designate specific people or groups that go ahead and do it, give them the resources and the tools to do it, and then, understand that whatever those results are going to change over time, and you're going to have to be flexible to deal with it.
Kevin, will you comment too?
Yeah, I think what Mike said is important. It's such a difference between a proactive approach compared to a reactive approach. You don't pay us just to tell you what the problems are or what has happened. I think what you pay us for is for solutions, results. For that to happen, you've got to put the issues on the table. You have to strategically look at how to better your club, how to better your operation constantly. It's something that you shouldn't look as a negative. You should look at the challenge as a positive and continually push yourself to become better. So I really think it's the difference I see in our industry of the clubs that do a great job and managers that have good positions is because they're proactive in approach.
Colin, you must have done this once or twice in 23 years.
As a matter of fact, we're in the process right now of completing phase 2 of a 3-phase master plan. And the master plan is a result of probably 2 years worth of work. And it's funny that sort of somebody from the outside might look at Wingfoot and say, well, what do you need to do? You've got this, astonishing clubhouse and 2 golf courses in the top 100. We've got a future open, future other events. But we looked at the facility, including the golf courses, membership demographics, our finances, and said, we just can't sit here. We've got to do something. So, believe it or not, we spent $4 million on a pool. Now, why did we do that? Well, it ties in with Michael's trends that he was discussing about the women. Now, we've always had a pool. Most people don't know we've had a pool. Most members haven't seen the pool, but we put it in actually back in the 60s for the very reason, because golf was trending down and we needed to attract the families. And when the board asked the membership about the pool, even those who didn't use it still wanted the pool. Now, so we looked at it and we said it would be foolish to just to bulldoze it. So, new pool, new practice facility. Gil Hans is at Wingfoot right now working on the East Golf Course. We're building a brand new employee house that'll house 30 people, new caddy facility. And I can assure you, this isn't being done because we have nothing better to do with the money. We had let certain parts of the club really deteriorate. And we looked at it, we said, we're not going to pass certain of these things on to the next generation. And we spent about 2 years, we worked with McMahon Group and some other folks, some architects and engineers, and came up with the plan. And again, we're now in the middle of phase 2. And so far, the reaction has been very positive.
I know Michael's commented this already, and I think your comment just now about the next generation. As a board, I think we're also supposed to be thinking about how to hand this club, whether to the next board or the next generation, better than we found it. And at times, it's been challenging to do that for all of our clubs. So the ability to kind of continue to invest and be proactive. I took it away last night and spent a couple of hours, and it was clear to me that those 3 buckets are, probably well represented in this room of where your club is in that cycle. And obviously, getting to be proactive would be the good place to be. As you might imagine, we could continue to bring up topics, and these guys could talk about this forever, but I know everybody wants to play golf and ultimately have lunch, so I think we will transition to Q&A for 15 or 20 minutes until Kevin or Kate tell us it's time. But I think, as you can imagine, there's a wealth of knowledge up here, and we'd love to do Q&A and find out what's on everybody's minds. So let's open it up for questions, please. And if we don't have any questions, I know a lot of people in the room, so I will call on you. So let's think about asking some questions.
A question about...
Just give us 1 second to get the microphone to you.
Questions about rationalizing a large spend for a fitness center. How do you get there, right? I mean, how do you go from the closet where some clubs are to really a meaningful fitness center that that attracts members solely for that purpose?
Who's got the newest fitness center?
Who's got the only fitness?
Who's got the only fitness center?
Well, I was asked that question after I finished up here. I mean, we started very small and we've grown to something, as I just said in my presentation. I think there was just a need. The big difference between Congressional and Baltusrol and Wingfoot is that we are a country club with all of the amenities. Colin mentioned he had a pool, but really both of them are golf clubs, and there's a difference between what they do and what we do. And I think what we're doing is we are all about family, and we are all about kids, and we're all about wives, and we're all about grandparents and all of the other things. So for us it was easy. We had a fitness center. It was oversubscribed. We didn't want to really spend a lot of money on that, but the demand was there. And once you start something and you see a demand, you have to move with that. So we went from being in a closet to going to 2,200 square feet to going to 8,000 square feet, and we still probably 5,000 square feet short. And when I told them at the time, the board at the time, we needed 12 or 12,500 square feet done on a calculation, we just didn't have an opportunity financially to go to there. We were in a $30 million program, and we didn't have the money to take it that extra bit. Do we regret it now? We finished it in 2009. Here we're in 2013. We regret not having gone to the bigger facility. So once you build it, they will come. And I think you have to have everything that you do in every other aspect of your club being first class, you have to do the same in all of these other newer things if you jump into them at the time. So,
Another question? Jordan?
Elston, I have a question for the panel and then maybe for the room at large. Regarding unescorted guest policy in your clubs, do you have one? Do you permit unescorted guests? And I'm just curious about a survey in the room of how many, because we're looking at that as well.
So let's start with the room. So how many allow unescorted guests? Let's start with during the season, from May till September. Small number. How about, early spring and late fall, unescorted guests? Not many more. Okay.
We do. Member sponsored, they need to be guest of members, so they still fall under their responsibility. We're very limited on it, and there's a price tag that goes with that, but we do that, yes.
Yeah, we do not. We've discussed it year after year. We have an opportunity for members to bring what we still call the Rule 7 or 11. So they're unaccompanied in a sense. So it's 11 guests with a member present. There's a premium on that, and it does not count against their guest quota, which we still have in place. But each year, when it comes to budgeting, we discuss unaccompanied guests, and it gets zero traction.
so where we differ from Baltusrol and Wingfoot is that we do not do outings, and I believe both of you gentlemen do outings. Okay, so we don't do outings, but we do allow unaccompanied guests. We allow one group on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And the reason for that was simply this, and I'm sure both of these gentlemen get the same calls I get. I must get 100 calls a week from club managers who happen to have members that are visiting our club. And we don't have, our rule is a member has to be present with guests. So it's a 1-to-3 ratio. The challenge we have is people don't travel in groups of 3 when they're playing golf. They travel in groups of 4. So what we decided to do that we would have one tee time allocated on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays at a tremendous premium. Our guest fee is $150 to play. If you come with a member brings you in. But if you do this, what we call a properly introduced unaccompanied group, it has to come from either the general manager, the head golf professional, or the president of a club to us in writing saying that you would accept the fees and everything else. We will do one of those groups a day. If we already have a group, we'll tell you we can't do it. And then the kicker is, we have a spot, we'd love to have you, but it's $500 a man. And the conversion rate of that does exactly what we want it to do, and that is turn away about 75% of the events on it. So it's qualified.
Yes, sir.
I wonder if any of you are doing anything others.
Questions around significant others?
We just had our first one, and we treated it just as though it was anything else. We just came in and went by, and no big deal.
Any restrictions?
No.
Have to live with that? Or have to-
Oh, it has to be a marriage. So in Maryland, sort of anything goes in Maryland.
Situation, but maybe you have older members that, for various reasons, don't have a significant other, but don't care to get married.
In that case, they would become, in our case, would become an annual guest, and that annual guest would have to be renewed annually. So we allow for it, but it has to be done annually.
Colin,
Come on, Colin.
No, we have no recognition of that significant other at this point. Thank you.
We allow them, although we did have a situation a number of years ago where a member had 3 successive different significant others, and we had to put a limitation.
So it's an annual designation. You got to date somebody for a year. I don't know if this is a topic for most, but I can tell you that Garden City Country Club is a topic that's come up the last 2 years, and Where we find it happening is going to be the older member. Turns out in this case, we've made accommodations for years when the husband dies, how to accommodate the wife. What we had never really thought about is the spouse passing away, wife passing away, and the husband's not going to get remarried, but does have a significant other. And we haven't come with the rolling year yet, where there's a new one every year, but we do have a few very senior members who have been around a long time and now have somebody that they want to have full privileges. So it's probably something that we'll spend more time on, not less. Anything, Kevin?
I was hoping I didn't have to answer the
All right.
question.
We'll leave it alone. Lunch is coming. Next.
Just wondering if the group or any members have any new ideas that have been successful attracting new members.
There's probably everybody in the room that has an opinion on this, right? There isn't a board that hasn't dealt with it, but maybe you want to answer it or you want to answer the question?
I can tell you what we did, and we can be very successful at it.
Great, microphone's coming. Could you introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah, my name is Silvio Ingwe. I'm the president of North Jersey Country Club. We struggled with this for a long time. We saw the economy coming about 5-6 years ago. We came to the conclusion that it's more important to get the members in if it's a financial issue, because having annual paying dues is better for budgeting than just getting a one-shot initiation. So we also understand that there's a different demographics going on. We have a lot of young professionals. They didn't have the same mentality of saving money and asking someone to write a $40,000, $50,000 check up front was going to be difficult. And yet they had the income. You know, I call it the car payment plan. Basically, you know, when we were kids, we bought cars. Today, everyone leases cars. It's just the mentality of the generation, the changes going forward. So we instituted programs where you pay over time, no strings attached. If you come to the club, you go through the whole vetting process. If you're accepted, your initiation fee is spread over. Originally we started 5 years. We're now shrinking a little bit. We're down to 4 years. And you pay over time. If you don't like the club, you leave after 2 years, no obligation, because we feel it makes it easier to get them in the door. We were confident enough that if you got into the door and you liked our club, we weren't going to lose any. And I don't think we've lost very few as a result of this. We went through big renovations this past year, and we're proud to say we're one of the few clubs in North Jersey that is full membership now. We have a waiting list, and I think it's been very successful. We're starting to move the initiation fee back up, shrink the payment, but I think it's going to be a permanent part of our membership is to allow people to pay it over time and not require someone to write a huge check up front. Because, you know, nowadays, especially in our plan, the check is mostly in his own initiation fee. There's very little bond money there. The bond is worth $1. So if you write a big check and you don't like the club after a year, that's money gone. So we don't want to do that, but people would be hesitant. You know, I don't want to write that check if I don't like the club in a year. I just thrown away a lot of money. So we make it easier for them to get in the club, participate. And our experience is you're going to like the club. We're confident enough, so we're going to collect this money over time. We're going to get our money, and it's worked great.
Thank you. Guys, you want to comment at all? Maybe we ask the audience to continue to comment here because we're in the trenches every day on this topic as board members trying to figure this out.
I'm Bill Aaron from Rock Ribbon Country Club in Stamford, Connecticut. And we were faced with the same membership challenges last year. And we brought in a consultant, some people in the room may know. And part of the program was the ability to preview the club for a year. You signed up you applied normal application process, you signed up, you had the ability to pay your dues for 1 year contractually. And if you decided you wanted to stay by July 15th, you got the benefit of reduced initiation fees. And if you didn't, you wanted to stay the year, then decide later the initiation fees were back up to the stated levels they were. And exactly we had the same result, where we brought in 30 new members and 100% of them decided to write the initiation check in July and become members. So that worked out very, very well for us.
Anybody else want to comment?
Hi, I'm Joe Galan, Director of Golf at Fiddler's Elbow Country Club. For the club's entire history until about 18 months ago, it was purely corporate. The club's trustees, we are not member-owned, we are privately owned for profit. The club's trustees made a huge step forward in trying to round out the club. One of the major factors was corporate golf was way down. The club did a number of corporate outings previously, which kind of filled the space, and there was a lot of unaccompanied guest play and not a whole lot of member play. That ratio was quite different. Now, with the economy, with a reinvestment into the club, they have opened the club to individuals as well as families, and we are building all of the amenities to go with that. So in the last, I want to say 18, 19 months, we've had over 200 new members, plus, and that's core members, plus their families. So we've been quite successful by changing the model a little bit to be a little bit more in tune with what the demand is for our area. So that's one of the things we've done, and it's been quite interesting to see over the last 18 months.
Great, thank you. Stephen, you want to comment? Or are you just taking the mic?
I can do both.
You could be last if you want to comment.
I guess I'd just say that, you know, for all of you that might be challenged with membership, please feel free to reach out to the MGA, because there are consultants, there are people that can help. There have been a number of clubs that have been very successful with these consultants. We've had them speak before. Maybe you've missed them, maybe you've just come on as president, but don't feel like you're on an island. We can help with that with some consultants. We don't necessarily recommend them, but we would give you their names and let you interview their process.
Thanks, Steve. What I would add to that is, last night at dinner, these three gentlemen talked about how there's a little bit of an alliance among certain clubs that spend some time talking about all of these topics. And I would hope that what you take away from today is not only reaching out to the MGA, but reaching out to each other. Just using Long Island, for example, there's 70+ private clubs, and the ability to know our friends at all these other clubs and reach out and say, hey, we're struggling with some of these topics, or we have some ideas, what are you guys doing? It shouldn't be just that you come here today and you leave here today and you show up again a year from now and you say, what is the MGA telling us we should or shouldn't be thinking about? I think it's more around what is everybody doing at their clubs and how can you share that information with each other and with us. And I would bet that you will find really valuable information. You go back 5 or 10 years ago when everybody was an island unto themselves and we all had 2 to 3 to 5, 10-year waiting lists, you didn't need any of this information. Obviously, we all talked about today what's changed and how we can continue to try to make our clubs as successful as possible. So I hope you take some of that away from today.